Nice one. So, Christina, thank you so much for joining me. We met through a fitness-related community group, and you are a professional when it comes to all things fitness, health, and holistic nutrition related. And you started out with a really cool variation of this job, right? Touring, being the health executive, or I don't know what the title was with Fleetwood Mac, right?
Wellness coach.
Wellness coach. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's funny that you say wellness coach because so I'm a holistic nutrition educator and lifestyle change specialist. And so I came up with the term lifestyle change specialist 14 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went and they said, what's your title? I said, I'm a lifestyle change specialist. And they said, lifestyle change, we're not going to call you that. It wasn't even something that was a buzzword, and
Right.
So they said, we're going to call you the wellness coach. And now here we are in these modern times where lifestyle change has become a household name and doctors are now using it. And anyhow, but yeah, I was in my 20s and I had moved to Maui, Hawaii. And, against, a lot of my friends and family thinking I'm wild. And if I'm honest, the motivation for moving to Hawaii was to learn to get better at surfing.
Mm-hmm.
And I started a fitness business there. I started working at resorts, doing personal training. And then I started an in-home fitness and training and in-home retreats. So going into people's houses, helping them do a retreat in their home and teaching their cooks how to grocery shop and whatnot. And started working with Mick Fleetwood, who lives in Maui, was based in Maui, gave him his prescription and said, I'm going to help you lose 45 pounds. He was getting ready to go on tour and dealing with, all sorts of metabolic health issues. And
just 45 pounds.
Yeah, a lot of weight, right? And so, just like any client, I wrote the prescription of this is how we're going to do it. This is how long it's going to take. And he signed on. And of course, it was a pinch me moment, like, okay, wow, let's do this. And so I ended up moving to Los Angeles and moving in with him and Christine McVie into a big mansion in Santa Monica, and they were working on an album and were recording that, and then they were working on getting ready for their tour, their comeback tour. And it was a gamble. Initially, I had my first meeting with the tour manager, and he was like, there's no way we're bringing you on the tour. You'd have to literally travel with the principals, you'd have to be in the fancy hotels, the cost of bringing someone. We've never brought a wellness coach, so I did a little bit of everything, a lot of cooking. I actually would travel to the mobile kitchen, and physical therapy, strength training, a lot of pre-show, post-show, wrap-ups, travel with a cooler bag. I mean, you name it, I did it, right? I wore lots of hats. And so I ended up, lo and behold, being brought out on tour and ended up doing 2 tours, and it was life-changing. I mean, not only the most amazing way to see the world, but I developed the mantra that I now carry through with clients, which is learning to take your show on the road. And so I started that in 2013 and have been living out of suitcases ever since. And it's really helped my brand, in terms of we're no longer in one place. And there's so many of us, of course, you and I, that are living abroad, traveling abroad. And for many people, you pack the suitcase, you get on the airplane, and all your healthy habits go out the window.
I was going to say that is one of the biggest things that people struggle with, right?
Yeah. Taking your show on the road. And with musicians, I didn't have to be cooking their food, but that was the only way to ensure they were on a fully anti-inflammatory protocol, following an exact diet, really being methodical, right? And I love the mantra flexible rigidity, where we can have some flexibility, but there's lifestyle non-negotiables, I call them. And on tour, it was the most amazing thing with tour, especially a tour of that magnitude, is everything is run like you are going to the moon with the day-to-day scheduling. I mean, it is so incredibly meticulously planned from the moment you wake up until the moment they step on show. And so with the 2 principals that I worked with, it was very much keeping that rigid momentum going with the food, sleep, meal timing, exercise, tracking all the biometrics and really running it, because it's a lot, right? And they were 60 and 70-year-old musicians. And it was incredible to see the value in taking that lifestyle on the road. And of course, for me, it was, just a dream come true. I'll tell you actually a funny story.
Please. I was going to ask for some.
I moved cross country when I was 3 days after I graduated college. I had a guinea pig and a chocolate lab and a partner. And him and I, we packed up our Subaru and we drove cross country. And I've believed in manifestation forever. And you know how sometimes when you're young, you have these dreams that you wouldn't even tell anyone out loud because they sound so far-fetched. So in my little journal, I wrote, all I want to do when I grow up is travel the world with a rock band. No joke. Never showed it to anyone. And then here I was, 6 years later, seeing that dream come true, which was just incredible. But anyways, along the road, I decided that I wanted to work with people online because people kept saying, can you coach me? Can you work with me online? And another funny fact is now I have a fitness app and I run a fully online remote platform. I couldn't even turn on a computer. I got a D in computers in college. I would teach 30 fitness classes a week. I was not a sit in a chair, work at a computer person. So when someone would say, will you coach me online? My head would spin because I had no idea what that would even look like. Nor did I want to put out some sort of a platform or content that wasn't going to be professional. So, the cool thing was between tours, not the cool thing, but I had a gnarly accident and I broke my knee. I tore every ligament in my knee. And at that time I said, you know what? It's time I'm going to build an app because at that time I was in my late 20s and I thought to myself, I can't use my body forever. It was such a wake up call, and any fitness trainer, I think it has some point says, what do I do after this? Because as you and I both can commiserate on, injuries and relying on the body is a tough thing. So I decided I was going to sit in that chair for 12 to 15 hours a day and build a fitness app. And so that injury turned into being probably one of the most amazing things that ever happened to me. And then within that year, I was back on tour and was able to, take into the second tour my online platform and really continue building it so that when COVID hit, I had this fitness app with hundreds of hours worth of content that I was able to, kind of be ahead of the game in terms of online training. I think that was a really monumental time for online trainers and online nutritionists because people that possibly never would have decided to go the route of online training were finally opening their eyes and, looking for and using online platforms. But yeah, I mean, the tour days were incredible. And I think it also opened my eyes to this concept of remote work and never wanting to work for somebody else, and when I graduated college in 2007, nobody was working, and it wasn't even a thing. This concept of digital work, remote work, and so now here I am at 40 years old, working fully remote, living across the world in Bali, and, having that confidence to travel that those years touring, provided me with.
It definitely comes with the experience. I've got two of my closest friends back in the UK that are looking to move to Australia. And for them, it's such a massive mental hurdle crossing that first boundary to go, right? And they say to me, I don't get how you can just rotate every year at the drop of a hat. And it becomes normal once you become experienced in it, right? But anyway, I don't want to move on from Fleetwood Mac just yet. I wanted to ask, what was it like working with them? Were they cooperative or?
Oh my God, they are the most amazing people. Yeah. The neat thing first of all, they called it the Fleetwood Food Tour.
Right.
Because it was just incredible. I mean, and the neat thing is there's a lot of people that are in that, they call it a camp, in that camp that are touring, whether it's the crew or the management and the assistants. I mean, there's a huge support staff. And I was the new girl. The first tour, I was told literally to wear black, fit in, and talk to no one. And so I did. I bought every black outfit you could possibly have. And but it was, by the second tour, I felt like I was, making my way in to be part of the family. But they're the most amazing people. I mean, it was absolutely incredible. And not to mention the amazing people you meet on the sidelines and backstage. The cool thing about a Fleetwood Mac show, and I think I've been to about 180 around the world. And it's a sing-along, whereas as opposed to a lot of shows, it maybe attracts a certain demographic, a certain type of person. Fleetwood Mac appeals to everybody.
Everyone,
I mean, you'll see kids, and you'll see your grandparents out there. So it was just wonderful. It was absolutely, they're just such cool people. And I, friends would ask, what's it like backstage? Are they still part, because of course they're known for their golden years of being wild.
Yeah.
What's it like backstage? And I say, you know what? They're eating almonds and drinking protein shakes. Like there's no hanky panky. Like it's not wild, but
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah. Any musicians that are touring in their 60s and 70s, there's one of my favorite quotes is rock stars don't age because, and it's the most inspiring thing for people to see how these musicians, whether it's U2 or, there's amazing musicians that are touring now, they are so dedicated to not only their music, but their bodies and the passion that they have. I think if we all got back to more music and dance, the world would be a better place. And so, the discipline and the regiment and, the endurance that it takes to do a tour like that is, I was exhausted. Mick Fleetwood is a machine. I mean, we wake up at, he'd be up at 8 a.m., bright-eyed, and just on all the time, just relentlessly. And it was incredible. You never wanted to be the one yawning because, my life was easy in comparison. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so then let's start dialing into what you do now. Do you primarily work with women?
It's actually a good question. No. I would say there is definitely... I would say it's slightly tipped on the scale of women. But I'm really fortunate that my demographic is really wide. Of course, there's a lot of Fleetwood Mac, fans. I sort of developed a large following, during those days. Michael Franti was another client of mine for years who has a resort here. And I've developed a huge following through his fans, which are just incredible people. And then right now I'm working with girls I went to high school with, college with, girls I know from living in Lake Tahoe, friends I know from Hawaii. So my business is primarily word of mouth. In Hawaii, we call it coconut wireless. And I think that's sort of my favorite thing about my business is it's been, it's grown organically as much as, you can have a big social media following. So I would say both men and women. I work with a lot of clients that, yes, of course, are trying to lose weight. But I also work with a lot of clients that have been doctor's referrals, whether it's blood sugar imbalances, hormonal imbalances, depression. A lot of clients that have gone through cancer or have any sort of metabolic issues. I also work with some young girls in high school that are dealing with menstrual issues, skin issues is a big problem. And then a lot of men, I have a partnership with one of the largest insurance companies in America, which is called Cigna Health, and Liberty Insurance Brokers is who the partnership is with. And so I've been working with a lot of their executive team. And these are, with men and women, and these are just bosses, really successful, powerful people that want the abs. It's sort of a new status symbol, health and wellness. And anyone that's past 40, 50, 60 years old has quite honestly probably tried many diets and failed. And yeah, that's
an interesting statistic on diets that I'm going to throw at you in a minute. But the reason I asked about the female thing is because a female friend of mine and myself were sat on the beach the other day, and we were people watching as people went past, and a rather large woman walked past with a rather small man, and we got onto the subject discussion, and she said that it's a lot harder for women to lose weight than it is for men. And the sentence rang true for me, like when she said it, but I didn't know why. And I asked the question why, and she didn't know why either. But intuitively, it feels like that would be the truth. So I put it into old trusty ChatGPT to see if it is true, if men and women have different difficulties in losing weight, and women apparently do find it harder to lose weight.
I mean, 100%. And it's funny that you say that. The first thing I'll say is I work with a lot of couples, right? So I'll either work with the man and then the woman says, hey, that's really interesting, or vice versa. It's 100% more challenging for a woman to lose weight for a myriad of issues. The first one I'll say is just naturally men typically have more muscle mass relative to a female.
Mm-hmm.
Larger muscle, more muscle means they have a higher basal metabolic rate.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I would say is a man's hormones have a 24-hour cycle and a female's hormones have a 28-day cycle. And through that 28-day cycle, their insulin sensitivity and their metabolic rate fluctuate drastically, right? So during their follicular phase, they're going to have an elevated metabolic rate. And during their luteal phase, the second half of their cycle, their metabolic rate slows down and they're less insulin sensitive, right? Causing a natural fluctuation in their metabolism and their burn rate. The other thing I'll say about women is there's a little bit of, I would say, women being under attack. We're prone to a lot more exposure to chemicals, toxins, birth controls, and just quite frankly, stress, right? And then we can add in, has a woman had children or not, right? If a woman is working 15 jobs between taking care of herself, her children, her husband, working a full-time job, taking care of her parents, taking care of animals, right? Trying to have a social life, trying to keep up with her fitness, being a full-time chef and probably doing the cleaning, right? And trying to keep her legs shaved, her armpits shaved, and her nails looking pretty. That's a lot. And so women are dealing with adrenal fatigue that affects them on a really deep level, paired with the emotional relationship with our hormones. And so I would say there's all of these issues. A woman's approach to strength training and exercise is also much different than that of a man's. And especially when a woman enters what I call her delicate flower years, which starts around age 43. Even earlier now, we call those your perimenopausal years.
I learned about that through this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Where it's very much a stimulate, don't aggravate, which is another mantra where, yes, maybe we could get away with calorie restriction, over exercising, very little sleep, right? And those things, when we enter that chapter, are really going to backfire and add to this compounding, what we call adrenal fatigue, which slows down the thyroid and just causes weight loss resistance ultimately. So long-winded way of saying, yes, it can be much harder for a woman to lose weight than a man.
I think there's the biological point and the hormonal points that you were touching on. And I also think that there's a societal reason behind that as well. And I did some research before this to look into it. I just want to throw some statistics at you. One of them I promised that I would a minute ago. 91% of women are unhappy with their bodies and resort to dieting. That's from Psychology Today. 45% of women are trying to lose weight at any given time. That's from CDC. And the girls as young as 9 years old start worrying about body image.
It's wild. I think those are really fascinating statistics and just really terrifying. I think the older that I've gotten, the more I feel that all of us women are a team. And my empathy and my love for every woman just grows and grows for all of those factors. I think most women spend their entire lives either gaining or losing their weight, or trying to gain or trying to, lose weight, or are gaining or trying to lose weight, and never actually learn anything about maintaining. And it's absolutely terrifying that most women don't understand the connection between their mindset and their thoughts and how that actually impacts their hormonal system. Because you can diet and you can exercise, but if you don't have that peace of mind and that empowered positive self-esteem, then you will have a constant cortisol secretion and you actually will cause weight loss resistance and further your hormonal damage. And we live in a world where the augmentation of our bodies, or the filters, or whatever it may be, you can do that as much as you want, but it's those formative years where your belief system is ingrained upon us. And so our amygdala, little part of our brain that houses those behaviors and those thoughts, right? The first thing I talk about when I work with a client is mindset shifts, positive mantras, going on a negativity diet, right? Avoiding the mirror. What's interesting is when a woman is in that luteal phase, I'm in that phase right now, right? You actually see something different when you look in the mirror. You see yourself as less attractive. You see yourself as less symmetrical. And so that is so important. And teaching a woman how, when your estrogen drops, right, chemically, you just don't feel as great. So instead of punishing ourselves with tight clothing and looking in the mirror and pinching, you have to really give yourself a break and say, I'm not playing with the full deck of cards today. I'm going to really do some work to work through this and give myself a break and shift, rather than doom scrolling or comparing or putting ourselves into that situation, which causes a cortisol spike. And now all of a sudden we're reaching for the glass of Sauv Blanc and a chocolate bar.
Yeah.
And we're back into that same cycle. So I think, I'm not surprised I've never heard the 91%, but there's a direct connection to disease. 1 in 4, I think 1 in 4 women in the US has an autoimmune disease. Majority of autoimmune diseases are affecting women more than men. And there's a direct correlation between the self-love and our metabolism.
And there's this social media trend that I've seen recently. There's 2 actually that I'd like to touch on. The first one is dad bods. Have you heard of dad bods?
Oh, of course.
so there's dad bods, and maybe this does exist, but I've never seen mum bods, as if that's glorified. So it's fine for men to put on weight when they become a parent and get a bit out of shape, and that's fine. But it doesn't glorify the same thing for women. But the thing that I was going to refer to there that I'd seen is a girl diet. Have you heard of a girl diet?
No.
Okay, so I think it's in the similar camp of girl math, where it's mostly girls just laughing at themselves for dealing with things illogically, or girl dinner, and it's where it's literally like a piece of toast and a bit of peanut butter or something like that, or it's an apple and a granola bar. And men typically don't head down that route, and women do. They can tell themselves that it's okay to just eat next to nothing. And as you say, they don't learn what maintenance is and what it should be. And women are 2.5 times more likely to get an eating disorder than men.
Yeah, so that's a new one, the girl diet. I mean, I think if we go back, 70 plus years, there has been a trend of, restrictive starvation diets, and they're still happening, right? We've got wild 500 calorie a day diets.
Yeah.
And this has been normalized, right? I remember back in the day, reading Self magazine, Shape magazine, and they all talked about these 1,200 calorie meal plans, and that became this golden number. And as someone who's dealt with restrictive eating and has tried, the starvation diets, I think what's very interesting, and I love really conveying to people, is your body has one evolutionary adaptation, and that is when it senses that there is a war and a threat to survival, it knows one thing: shut off metabolism, store fat, survive the war.
Yeah.
And so in our modern world, we are facing huge, devastating wars. We have the war on sleep. We have the war on malnutrition or not getting enough of the nutrients. We have the war on dehydration. We could go through the whole list of toxins and war. But one of the biggest wars is caloric restriction. And when you chronically undereat, yes, can we get away with that when we're young? Potentially. And your body is resilient? Yes. But prolonged or extreme calorie restriction will trigger your body into thinking that there's a war, and your metabolism is the most adaptable part of your body. It's fascinating, right? Most people don't even know what their metabolism is. We can touch on that. So when your body thinks that there's a war, it says, okay, I know what to do. Dump a big bucket of water on my metabolic fire in the form of thyroid inhibiting hormone in a panicked effort to save your life. And so if a woman or a man, because there's many men that have starved themselves, but yes, it's so much more normalized for women, right? when a woman starves herself repeatedly for years and years and years, potentially maybe Monday through Thursday and then Friday, through Sunday she eats, right? That's even worse.
Yeah.
Her metabolic rate slows down and down and down and down. And not only is she losing muscle, right? She's also slowing her metabolic rate down. And then anytime she eats in any sort of a surplus, let's say plus 1200, she's going to store that because your body thinks, I know what to do with this weight. And so those calorie restrictions are causing major, major issues that we're seeing, causing depression, causing infertility, causing, hair loss, causing, obviously weight loss resistance, osteoporosis, osteopenia, and just a major dysregulated nervous system. And again, further deepening the self-esteem issues. So the girl math, totally for it. I love girl math. The girl diet, I would say, it's a shame on our diet culture. It's a $50 billion a year spent in the US on diet-related crap. And, I don't push supplements. I don't push fad diets. I'm so grateful to be working in holistic nutrition, which is rewiring that wheel for people with their connection to food, because food is the way the organism of our body grows. Our body is truly nutrient dependent.
It is fuel. And we are a machine that we're looking to fuel. And my little brother, he messaged me the other day saying he'd heard him get a shout out in the podcast for the first time. So this is his second. But he messaged me the other day saying that he was trying to diet, and he's a pretty big lad now. He's been going to the gym for a few years. He's put on a bit of muscle mass, and he's trying to get away with eating 1,500 calories a day. And his maintenance is probably around 2,800. And he's like, it's just not working. Like every time I see a biscuit, I have to pick it up and eat it. And I was like, it's not working because that's a ridiculous fucking deficit. Like you need to, and he's like, yeah, but I just struggle. And I was like, you're struggling because what you're trying to do fundamentally is not the solution. This is why. So stop looking at why this isn't working, because it's fundamentally not supposed to work, because your body is not supposed to survive on half of its recommended daily amount of maintenance calories. And I felt like I got a bit stressed when I was trying to get the point across. But there's so many people these days that think it's normal to just do no carbs as a diet. That was a massive trend in the UK. It was a slogan.
Everywhere, yeah.
It was a slogan of no carbs before Marbs, Marbs being a holiday place in Europe. And again, those kind of diets are so bad for your body if you're just bringing them on in a short phase and then just you're going to go back to consuming excess calories again and just taking yourself through those, right? And as a general statistic as well, 60% of adult women, whether they're dieting or not, do not consume the recommended amount of fruit and vegetables. They're twice as likely to suffer from anxiety and depression, which will directly impact their fitness adherence. And they're more likely than men to experience emotional eating, which is tied to the stress or the mood as well. So they're playing life on hard mode by trying to do these things rather than getting to what you were talking to earlier about maintenance.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much there that you just touched on. Shout out to your little brother, because maybe that 1,500 calorie was a great, initial deficit. I will never work with a client until they learn the concept of reverse dieting and preventing a plateau, because rebound weight gain is so terrifying, and that yo-yo dieting is wild. And, in learning the set point phenomenon and teaching someone about how their fat cells work, there has to be a protocol for reversing and coming out of a diet to stay what we call metabolically flexible. Now, I'll be the first person to say that, if someone said, hey, you could win $5 million and you're going to take a group off the street and all you have to do is get them to lose the most weight in 6 weeks.
Of course.
I would say, okay, if these people know nothing about nutrient composition, I'm going to take away all the carbohydrate and I'll win. Right? Short term, great. All those people will win because, of course, if we take carbs away for a short amount of time, that will be amazing, right?
Then look at them 6 months after.
After we start feeding those same people carbs, they're going to blow up like a tick.
Yeah.
Because once your body doesn't have metabolic flexibility, it goes into that storage mode. And so learning carbohydrate timing and when to eat carbs when we're going to use them, and how to create, fat loss windows or increase insulin sensitivity is so important. I would say when it comes to the connection between malnutrition and anxiety and depression, there's a direct link, right? Because I mean, in the US, an interesting statistic is 92% of people are malnourished. And
92% of people in the
are
United
malnourished.
States. So go a little bit deeper on that one for me, because I think the image that comes to most people's head when you hear the word malnourished is a starving
child in Africa.
with
Wild,
rib
right?
cage, right?
Yeah.
But that's not actually, it doesn't mean that you're skinny.
Yeah.
It's talking about your nourishment and your nutrition, right? And there's over 50% or it might be 40% of the US are obese.
74%
are obese.
Are overweight.
Okay, are
It's
overweight.
Over 40, I think it's 42. I could be wrong on the statistic, but I think it's around 42 are obese.
Okay.
So yeah, how could that be, right?
They're obese and malnourished.
Malnourished.
Yeah.
And so I think, just to go back to like a premise of why this is happening, it's a lot of work for your body to take a plate of food, absorb it through your intestine, get it into, break it down to its small building blocks, take it to the liver, convert it into its active form, and take it into your cells and turn it into energy, right? That's a lot of work. So there's a couple reasons. The first is I'm a gut specialist, right? Everyone's guts are out of whack, right? So we're either not able to absorb the food that we're eating because it's depleted of fiber, or it's depleted of our gut absorption is out of whack because we've got inflammation in our gut. The second is the food is devoid of nutrients. And the third is we're just not eating enough of the good food. So if you look at your body as a big organism, right, that's nutrient dependent, we have essential nutrients, right? Meaning nutrients your body has to get from food. And if we don't get those essential nutrients, then those nutrients are the building blocks or the cofactors to power the reaction to keep the lights on in your house. And so if we know that most people are not eating enough fruits and vegetables, they're not getting the diversity in those nutrients and plants, and manufactured processed foods are depleted of nutrients, right? These aren't real foods. The bioavailability of these foods isn't great. Then somebody doesn't even have the building blocks to repair and regrow and rejuvenate their body, nor do they have the building blocks to power reactions to keep the lights on and to make ATP or to make energy. And so, yes, their entire body is depressed because they don't make energy. And I would say most all clients that come to me complain of, I just have no energy, because we don't have the fuel to make the energy, or we don't have the powerhouses in the cells, the mitochondria in the cells. And so the first step towards reversing that is eating more of the good stuff. And that's sort of my mantra. You see me all over social media talking about eating the rainbow, eating the vitamins, the minerals, the fiber. Because once you don't get those nutrients, your neurotransmitters in your brain slow down and your body goes into that war mode where it just depresses the system and we don't make energy. And once your gut doesn't have what it needs, and I don't want to go too deep into the physiology of the gut, but essentially you get leaky gut, where unwanted particles enter the body, flood the blood, and cause systemic inflammation. And we know that majority population has leaky gut every week, right? Well, inflammation blocks hormonal communication. It's like your hormones trying to talk through a pillow, right? They just can't do it. And so that furthers depression and, essentially messes with the nervous system, which causes a hyperactivity of our nervous system. And now we're just not sleeping. And in the US, majority of the population is not sleeping enough. And I think that kind of speaks for the rest of the world now with the digital overload and the amount of modern day stressors. So
100%.
Long-winded way of saying, yeah, if we don't eat or absorb the nutrients that we're eating, then we have malnutrition, and the ultimate end goal after a bunch of cortisol dysfunction and, adrenal fatigue is depression, and we're seeing the rates of depression soar.
I have friends that talk to me about their mental health issues and everything else. And I've got friends that, don't get me wrong, I've spoken about him on the podcast. I've actually had him on the podcast, who went through a period of depression, and he was an Iron Man who ate clean, cooked all his own food, was super fit, and he was depressed. And I was like, okay, I don't know how to help here, it's just being there for him. But so many people don't realize the effect that your nutrition has on your mood. And it seems stupid, right? Because if you ask someone, does what you eat affect your mood? You would say yes. But then there's still this disconnect, or there isn't enough of a connection that causes them to actually watch that behavior. And I noticed this in myself. I had a period earlier this year where I felt amazing for 3 weeks. I just felt on top of the world, like nothing could touch me. And I was talking to one of my friends, I was like, I'm trying to work out exactly what it is that's keeping me in this mindset so I can hang on to it. And the biggest thing, there were two big things. One of them kind of unrelated to what we're talking about, but it was just to do with what I was spending my dopamine on. And it was that I wasn't binging in the night, so I was waking up energized in the morning. But the other thing is I'd been eating clean, not on a diet as in trying to lose weight and cutting calories, but I just hadn't eaten any shit for 3 weeks. So I was just trying to be clean. And I felt incredible. And I realized the connection. And once you've actually seen it for yourself and then it's tangible and you can feel that relation between what goes in and then what you feel inside, it makes it a lot easier to manage it. And don't get me wrong, I still binge. And the funny thing is I know the next morning when I've binged the day before. And now I've got that connection, it's so much easier to say no to things that aren't good for me because I know that the next day I'll feel a certain way. And a lot of people that suffer with anxiety and depression, I gave a kind of statistic on it there with women, there's a massive correlation between the nutrition deficit and the bad dieting and mental health.
Gosh, I mean, you nailed it. I guide through clients through a self-study with the goal of being able to separate yourself emotionally from physiologically. Your body talks to you constantly. We just oftentimes ignore the messages or the biofeedback our body's giving us, right? For example, a craving is one of the most profound messages your body can give you. I speak of someone that's malnourished, and until they get those nutrients, their appetite center, their hypothalamus, and their brain is going to be turned on until they fulfill those nutrients. And so 92% of the people in the US, they're constantly hungry. They're constantly craving something until they actually get that good stuff consistently. Now, what I would say to your buddy is show me your sleep log. And are you keeping a circadian rhythm? There's no rocket science to this stuff. There's 4 things that go into being, having a balanced nervous system: sleep, hydration, blood sugar, and gut health. And most, I would venture to say, and again, I'm not a doctor, that most mood and energy issues go back to blood sugar, right? Now, sleep is the most underestimated and most important, right? In a perfect world, we would wake up with the sunrise and go to bed with the sunset. And so what most people don't know about their gut is that about 90% of their serotonin is made in their gut. And at night, that same gland that makes serotonin switches over to melatonin production. What
Do me a
triggers,
favor, just before you go any further, I know what serotonin and melatonin are, but if you can just explain for anyone that might not.
So you have what we call happy hormones: serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, adrenaline, right? These are all neurochemicals, neurotransmitters. And so serotonin would be your happy, feel good, give you energy hormone. And so we love it, right? And it's a stimulant. 90% of it is made in our gut.
In your gut.
Yeah. 50% of your dopamine is made in your gut. And oxytocin's another brilliant one. That's the love, happy hormone.
Do you know how much of that is made in the gut? I don't know. I'm curious.
I don't really think much of it might be a little bit, but I don't really think, much of your oxytocin is made in your gut.
Okay. That's been my favorite hormone to be learning about recently, the pair bonding chemical.
Give all the hugs and the love, right? Just giving someone a compliment. You'd see how their light just lights up. Their life lights up. So anyhow, at night, that melatonin production is signaled by darkness.
And melatonin is?
The sleep hormone.
The sleep hormone.
Right? It comes in to tell your parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest system, to shut off. Your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which is your central nervous system, is supposed to go to bed. Right? Your growth hormone kicks in, your rejuvenation processes, your repair, right? Your blood sugar goes down, we make muscle, we get ready for the next day, get rid of all your junk. It's at night. So if we look at our modern world and potentially your buddy, right, he might be up way late with exposure to technology and blue light, watching TV, watching the news, playing video games, working, whatever people do. That's terrifying for our depressed systems. So what we have now in our modern world, there's a doctor in Washington that coined it in 2011. We call it popcorn brain, which is essentially hyperactivity of our central nervous system, which means we're not resting and we're not kicking into that parasympathetic rest and digest state. And when your cortisol is active all day long. We call it cortisol dysfunction. And again, cortisol is a stress hormone, and stress is your body's response to anything that requires attention or action. So you could be sitting on the couch watching a horror movie, your mother-in-law could be in town, or you could be malnourished or overtrained, or we could talk about anything that just requires attention, right? And so when you have that going all day long, we have all these sources of chronic stress, whether it's I feel so fat, or I'm dehydrated or whatnot. So that cortisol is active all day long, and it causes cortisol dysfunction, which is exhausting to the system. And so your neurotransmitters slow down and they stop working optimally. And then we don't sleep, we don't get your REM sleep, we don't get your delta sleep, we don't get the quality sleep, which leads to potentially some cognitive impairment and mood dysregulation and ultimately anxiety and depression. So I think what's fascinating in the biohacking world now, biohacking is what I teach. It's let's take some science, let's dabble with it, let's implement it into our lifestyle and see how you can be better tomorrow. And so if we look at our modern world, even someone that eats very healthy, works out every single day, right? Works a ton, is very successful. If they don't work at being able to calm their central nervous system, and I see this a lot with CEOs, with people in power, right? They can't shut off. And so now we're adding in the factor that if there is no calming activity, whether it is breath work, dancing, music, meditation, right? Then we won't have that stress resilience. We have a biological phenomenon called hormesis, and you and I practice this when we do a sauna or a cold plunge, where acute exposure to stress, like weight training, can build stress resilience. But if we don't check out, if we don't get into nature, if we don't practice calming our nervous system, then even your buddy who's doing all the right things with his diet and exercise still can lead to, to depression.
And you can think that you don't have a stressful life, but we, as a machine, have evolved to experience stress. And do you know Alex Honnold, the rock climber?
No.
No? I've quoted him on this podcast before. It's just this story. So he's a rock climber that was famous because he climbed the Dawn Wall in Yosemite, or El Capitan, and he did it free solo, so with no ropes. And it usually takes people...
Does he have the movie Free Solo? No.
I think that's him.
Okay,
yeah,
then I saw that movie. Those guys are nuts. I don't know, but anyway.
I think that's about him. But he was talking about having climbed that wall, and someone said to him, why do you do this? And he said after he climbed that wall, he was sat in the airport waiting to fly home, and the flight was delayed by 3 hours. And he was watching everyone around him lose their minds. They were stood up shouting, screaming, crying, and he sat there thinking, you're in an air-conditioned airport with comfy seats, unlimited food and water, and look at the stress that you're perceiving from this. And as someone who's just had his life on the line for 4 hours, it's funny, right, to see people experience stress in that environment. And what you were talking about there with the ice baths and the sauna, or even going to the gym and working out, by doing hard things, you train your body's tolerance as to what hard things are and enables you to handle more hard things. And if you don't do any of them, if all you do is sit and watch Netflix all day and you don't cook for yourself, and then all of a sudden Deliveroo goes down and you can't get your food delivered, that's an extremely stressful thing. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not, but you just haven't been exposing yourself to them. So I'm a massive advocate of putting yourself in hard situations, doing hard things, and the rest of your life will be easier.
I couldn't agree more. And for everybody, it's different, right? I call them spirit lifters. I also have another, a tagline of happy steps. My clients have to have a biometric device tracking watch. So whether an Oura Ring, Fitbit, Apple Watch. And so they can track their numbers, their HRV, their heart rate, their energy output, their sleep, right? Use these numbers to tune into how your body's functioning. And then when you add in the 5 minutes or 10 minutes of meditation, when you add in the 7,000 steps in nature, when you add in the yoga class, when you add in, of course, blood sugar, balancing through meal timing and carbohydrate timing, when you do your lifestyle mapping, I call it, it's all about being in control, right? Your body literally has one need: feel safe, feel in control. And in our modern world, we don't feel that. And so, we've got acute stress, we've got episodic stress, we've got chronic stress, and then we've got really good stress. We call that eustress. It's eustress. And that's like the give you adrenaline stress. That's like the stress you and I live for, the stress of getting ready to take a trip or going surfing or cold plunging or, racing to meet a work deadline, which can be great. But if you've got all these other layers of stress and it's just stress. So what I encourage clients to do is lifestyle mapping, where you sit once a week and you literally plan out everything. You plan out your meals. You plan out your meal timing. You plan out your workouts. You plan out your extracurriculars. You sit with your husband and you plan out the week. You lay out your clothes. You literally have to plan everything, because you'd be shocked with just opening up the refrigerator and seeing your meal prep and seeing food in the fridge, what that does to appeal to this innate need to be safe. And in our modern world, I don't want to get political, but our safety is being taken away. Our financial safety, right? Our social safety, our, we could go on and on. Our health safety, medical anxiety is plaguing people right now. So if we can start to make these little spirit-lifting daily activities, which feed you dopamine naturally, and you can take your lifestyle and make a plan, then you can wake up every day and instead of saying, oh my God, I have so much on my list to do. I've got to take the dog to the groomers. The kids have 17,000, extracurriculars. I've got to be mommy taxi. Oh my God, I've got a work deadline. My husband's out of town. Oh God, there's nothing in the fridge. And in the back of your mind, I need to work out. I need to work out. Oh my God, you're a fat pig, right? What does that do to your nervous system? That is overload. And so the only way to get to a place in our modern world, which even 10 years ago, I didn't put the emphasis on the mindset, the scheduling time for meditation, for breath work as I do now. Now it's at the top of the list because it has to happen as a means for survival. There has to be an emphasis. We have to track our screen time. If you don't have a limit on your social media apps at this point in life and you're finding yourself scrolling for 20 plus minutes a day, you're poisoning yourself. And
That's
discipline,
going to trigger a lot of people.
It's going to because I see clients with hours. But what we also forget is neuroplasticity, or discipline, if you will, is a muscle. And just like the muscles in our bodies, if we don't use them, we lose them. If you never grew up with parents that were disciplined or role models with discipline, then you just have to work at that. And so it's a practice.
It's a part of the brain.
Yes.
You're familiar with Andrew Huberman, right?
Yeah, of course.
A lot of what you said, I hear from him as well. And one of the things that he said has come out in recent data is there's actually a part of the brain that they've located somewhere in the middle. And I wish I could remember the name of it because I'd sound really intelligent, but I can't. So there's just a part of the brain. And they found that this part of the brain grows in people that are able to say no to things and have self-discipline. It grows with people who are in better shape, who are athletic, and it grows with people who are older as well. And they are finding a direct correlation between the size of this part of the brain and how long you live. So the more disciplined you are, literally the longer you will live.
100%. I think that's absolutely fascinating. I love Huberman. I mean, we are keeping people in fear with this mindset that everything is genetic, that longevity is genetic, but it's 85% lifestyle. And so this misconception that my parents or my grandparents were diseased and I'm that it's okay for me to be diseased, that's just not true. And we used to think that even our brain, cells and brain neurons aged and they just died off and we aged and we whittled up. And that's not true either. And so, yes, I think discipline is the most important piece of the puzzle when it comes to aging well, because it's a growth-oriented mindset, right? We can heal, right? You can't heal yourself if your mindset is negative. And I don't know that that's science, but there's a direct correlation to those two things, right? If you believe you can, you can. So it does, and it starts with discipline around sleep. It starts with drinking, your water. I have a a goal for clients, 3 liters of water before 3 p.m. Because 60% of the time we mistake hunger for thirst. And hydration is so important. Of course, here in Bali, we drink more than that because it's hot as can be. It's discipline with when you're eating and portion control. And it's discipline around going to the gym. But you mentioned something earlier about your 3-week run. And I call that with clients going on a run. And that's how long can we go doing all your non-negotiables, your sleep, your water, you're eating the good stuff, your meal timing, your exercise, your movement. And all of a sudden you go on a run and you feel amazing. And then you go back and you slip up, right? You either go out and you get drunk or you miss a couple nights of sleep. You get the eat clean curse where you haven't eaten a cheeseburger and fries and all of a sudden your body talks to you, and tells you, God, I hate you. And you otherwise maybe would have ignored those signals, right? You're just not playing with a full deck of cards. And instead of thinking, I'm so depressed, you say, oh, I know why. I didn't sleep. I didn't get my water. I haven't exercised in a few days. I traveled. I didn't eat any healthy food, and instead of saying, gosh, something's wrong with me, you can't wait to get back to your run, to your normal routine. And for most people, there is no routine. I love working with clients and they get on the phone with me and they're like, oh my God, I've had the worst week. I couldn't wait to talk to you. And if you're a nutritionist, you know that most people don't want to talk, to be a nutritionist, that people say, I can't wait to talk to you is I think the biggest compliment ever, because it's a reset. It's a reinforcement, that we're moving forward and that there's a win in everything. You fall off the wagon, there's a win. What did you learn from it? For you learned, I don't want to eat 3 hours before bed. I know that if I have a blood sugar spike before bed, which if you're dieting, that's, terrible in terms of blood sugar, but that's also going to give you a blood sugar spike and a blood sugar crash, which is going to disrupt your growth hormone and your sleep. And so all of a sudden, you don't eat sugar before bed for a week and you notice your HRV is up, your resting heart rate is down, your bowels, are looking more regular, your mood is better, your cravings have dissipated, you have more energy in the gym, you feel yourself more cognitively enlightened, you feel great. Like, wow, that's worth it. So behavior change is what I teach, and it's all about reinforcing to your brain that this is a good, useful behavior. And it might take some time to get there, but it's all about repetition, creating that habit, doing it, reflecting on it, and saying, oh, this is worth it. Right? Meal prepping, oh, this is worth it. Oh, wow, if I go for a walk in the morning, I'm in a better mood. Okay, this is worth it. And then all of a sudden, that task now becomes a habit. And it's something that we look forward to. And then all of a sudden, you're drinking less energy drinks. You're watching less TV. You're looking for less, synthetic sources of dopamine. It's a beautiful thing.
That's the biggest thing that stops most people, is because when you have the routine of no routine, or of eating all the shit and of not sleeping properly and binging on the dopamine, coming away from that is hard. So you think it's always going to be that hard because every time you've tried to do it, it's been really hard. But as you say, you end up reaching this new level of homeostasis where it's the new norm, and actually deviating from it, you then start feeling shit again. But Christina, I feel like we could go on for like another 3 or 4 hours.
I know. We'll see you at series 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.
100%. There's so many tangents with everything you say. I'm like, oh, we could go there, go there.
Yeah.
But I think also it'd be good to leave some things for people that would be interested in working one-to-one with you as well. So if anyone's interested in getting in contact with you or keeping up with what you do, where can they go?
Yes, I have 2 options for coaching: private one-on-one coaching, and then I also offer group coaching. And those are on 6-week cycles. I do have another one that's starting up soon, and I'll be getting more regular with those. So somebody can head to my website. It's fariasfitness.com. They can find me on Instagram, Farias Fitness LLC. You could email me, Christina at fariasfitness.com. And I also, I'm always available for just questions, whether it's social media or whatnot. I know I've touched on a lot. I have a 52-week education course. Of course, I have, 6-week modules. And when someone does work with me, I should mention there is no minimum, amount of coaching. But the goal is to get to a place where we're comfortable, where we have the education to end the confusion. And so, yeah, I'm here, and of course, clearly, I'm very passionate about this stuff, and it's all about a holistic approach. There's no diet, there's no fad. If someone's telling you that the answer is in a capsule, they've got something to gain.
That's another tangent that I thought we might go down today.
Yeah, but we'll talk about that another time.
Part 2 as Ozempic is coming up soon.
Yeah, we could talk about GLP-1s, all day.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I'll put the links that you just mentioned there in the bio below for anyone that wants to reach you. And yeah, I'm very impressed. I love that conversation, and thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome.